I've got a youth on my caseload. And so I apologize for hurting myself. Sure, I'll do it again. Yeah, but you're really frustrating because now it's like they want to be, because that indicates you still view them. How they use it. Yeah. No, he's been really patient. Because you know, there, you know,
Like, and then assume that's from the policy.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Pleasant Hill Monday, November 14th school board meeting to order. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of our mission statement. Drew, please read our mission statement.
Definitely. Our mission is to graduate all students with high levels of academic and personal achievement, ready for post-secondary excellence, prepared for productive, compassionate citizenship through research-based instruction and a collaborative system of support.
Thank you, Drew. Next item is change of deletions to the agenda. Do we have any? No? All right. 3.0 introduction of the audience. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Deborah Scupper, elementary principal. Jessica Wolpe, title reading third through fifth grade of elementary. Caitlin Thomas, title support for K2 and a parent, 7th and 3rd grade. Lena Gillenhouse, senior at high school. Karina Albright, senior.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Attendance at our previous meeting. What did we have on?
There was 6 online and 7 on the site.
Okay. 4.0 is presentation student communications. Wasn't the high school, middle school.
Well, I can give a quick introduction. Mr. Joe obviously is out sick today, and so he asked me if I could check in with our senior here. So we have introduced themselves. Yeah, and Lorraine. And that's with that. We'll have to they have some information they're going to share, the slideshow that they have to present.
Right, so yeah, I'm the senior class president and I'm vice president. And so yeah, Mr. Bureau just asked us to kind of report monthly on student body and kind of what's going on. So we're just gonna talk a little bit about homecoming week, how that went, the clubs and organizations going on, and then just like what's gonna come up. So to begin, we'll start with the spirit days and activities that went on. They went super well. We had so much more participation than last year, and we had lots of games during lunch and activities and assemblies, all went really well. And the only thing that didn't go so well was dressing days. We really did a ton of people messing up. We still learned from last year. And then we had the homecoming game, which was also meshed into the senior night for football, and unfortunately they lost. We were busy on the floats, but the freshman homecoming court was Andrew Willow and Six Jones. Sophomore homecoming court was Jordan Rina, Gavin Polio. Junior homecoming court was Cameron Tabor and John Fitzpatrick. And the senior homecoming lead and Kate were Travis Felix and Savannah Endicott. Floats turned out pretty good. And the first place was the junior for kids. Second place was for sophomores, with the Beach Boys. Third place was freshmen, with the Beatles, and fourth place were seniors. We usually don't get much help, our grades number. Not like very well. And then we have the dance, and we had very limited money with student government this year again. But I think it went super well, and we had a lot of the whole student council there, decorating, even with the volleyball playoff games going on, so that everyone there. And the students seemed to have a good time, they were cornhole outside, and the only two things were just kind of like not a lot of activities happening. And then, so we'll move on to the clubs and organizations. So for middle school this year, we have the knitting club, which is run by Ms. Castle. This is new this year, and she said it was going really well, and lots of students were participating. And then the Billy Book Club run by Mr. Hines, and this one started last year, and it's become very popular. So they meet once a week, and they meet and discuss their books, and people have snacks for them. And the only thing he had to add was that he would love to make an updated T-shirt for the club members and provide new books because they read it a lot. And then there's also the astrology club, which is student run. And we weren't able to talk to any of the leaders of that club, but we will next week. And then for the high school clubs, we have the garden club, which is run by Mr. Langston. It's for kids who just love plants, the environment, there's light maintenance from the school, which is really good positive impact. Mr. Langston did say that it's been difficult at times to do the things they wanted to because of limited money, but they would love to redesign the front sign area and plant trees and work with maintenance department to do that. And then we have the Dungeons and Dragons Club, which is run by Mr. Gray. That club always has great attendance and has been the past few years. And then this year we have Pleasantville Honor Society instead of National Honor Society. It's basically the same thing, just taking the national name. But that's the same thing, staff just nominate students and for independent community service projects as a school venture. And we have a reach again this year that's also put together by this bond venture. They'll be doing food drives, blood drives, gift drives, and it's just a bunch of community service activities. It's going super well for them. New this year, we have the GSA and Engage Street Alliance Club. It's one run by Mrs. Flood, and it's really good club. It creates a safe space for the students to feel heard and they can talk to each other, and there is an awareness around it. Or they talk about their lifestyle and identities and experiences. And the only thing that Mrs. Flood brought up is that it's kind of been hard for the students that are part of the club because they're typically the students who are targeted for bullying. So she wanted to kind of raise awareness around that, and is really helping a lot of students. And then we have Model UN this year, which we had previously, but not last year. So we're back to that, and Mr. Mines is running it this year. He said it's going super well. Students get to learn about the countries, support the work of the United Nations, discuss and debate. And the only thing he brought up was that he would just like more participation. I just don't think a lot of people are super aware of what it is. And then we have a few more clubs that we will talk about next meeting, but those include OBOB, Shakespeare, Destination Imagination, FFA, and Homestead. And then moving on, next coming up, the student council will be doing daily announcements over the intercom. Each grade is selected, has a designated day to have a class member speak over the intercom and morning announcements. We're also planning Spirit Week and activities in the student assembly for winter break. And some holiday stuff. We also might do a winter dance, which will probably be like late January or early February. Yeah, we're pretty glad to. So yeah, that's to come up. And then we were going to talk about something that we've been working on with Mr. Ryan, so we created a school podcast within the Department of and it's where we can interview students, teachers, and community members. It's sort of a modernized, continuation of the Word Bulletin. And our hope with this is to encourage more people to listen and become informed about, the stories that people are writing and what's going on with the school and the community, since we noticed a decline in people reading the Word Bulletin, especially students. So hopefully having a more modernized version of that will have more people listening. And then, so Mr. Myron has helped us a lot. I think he started this podcast equipment and helped us with a bunch of technology issues and all of that. And the only issue we're really having now is in places to do it. And the library does have an audio visual room, but right now it's occupied with infant simulators, like literally made babies that have not been used for any of the health curriculum in years. And there's strollers and baby clothes, there's TVs, there's all the stuff in there. And so we'll be working with the administration to find a solution for that and kind of get it figured out so we can hopefully have the audio visual room for us to start our podcast. And also hopefully the next grade levels will continue that for us next year. They can have that room for whatever they want. So we got some.
Where are you gonna post your podcast at?
So we are also working on a website there, it'll have all the episodes. And the website will also cost us money, so we're also working on a way to kind of fund that. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? It was great to have a presentation. We've missed having a student presentation for quite some time, so thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Hope you come back.
Thank you so much.
5.0 is a good forum. Individuals who are on site during this portion of the board meeting, members of the public are specifically invited to present items of foundation and or concerns at the discretion of the board chair. Further public participation may be allowed at the time specific agenda items are under consideration by the board. Individuals who are viewing online, PHSD posts the upcoming agenda on our website Friday before the regularly scheduled Monday school board meetings. This will allow for public comment prior to the board meeting. Please click on the tab provided to share your comments before the school board to consider at the upcoming meeting. Personnel matters may not be discussed in public at school board meetings. Members of the public who have personnel concerns or accommodations should share them directly with the district superintendent. So, do we have any public comments tonight? No, and do we have any online?
Yes.
All right. 6.0 board action items. 6.1 approve the consent agenda. We have two items there. One is the November 7th board meeting minutes. And the other is the financial report for October. We can take them both together. Are there any issues with board meeting minutes? No. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Good agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed. And we have 6.2, accept board policy JHCD and JHCDA. This is the second reading. We discussed our previous meeting. Basically, I think the main change to the policy was the addition of the ability to administer whether Narcan or opioid reversing drug, fentanyl reversing drug. So, we have any further discussion on that? Okay, and we would need a motion to accept that policy as in the exhibit.
I move to accept board policy JHCD. JHCDA.
Second. All right, moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Right, that's unanimous. 6.3. Consideration of removing interim level label from superintendent position. And move into negotiation for permanent superintendent position with Jim Christ. Little background on this. At our last meeting, Stephen mentioned that we should be discussing our superintendent search. Because it was suggested that we get that going in December in order to catch all the possible candidates later than December, and you missed the bus, so to speak. So with that in mind, we basically have to discuss the superintendent search process. And when we had interviewed for interim superintendents, one of the questions we asked was, would you be available for a permanent superintendent position if the board chose or asked for that? And some of the candidates were and some of them weren't. And so we're again in a position where with our interim superintendent, it would be time to either move into negotiations to change to a permanent position, or to not do that. And not doing that would mean that we would start the search process. And in starting a search process, then we would advertise for the position, and we would seek to apply. One of the risks we have, of course, is our interim superintendent then not having any guarantee of a position come the end of this year, would also start looking for a position somewhere else. So at this time,
And there are positions that are gonna be open this hiring cycle.
it sounds like there are
Including.
some superintendent positions in this area that are going to open up. One of the things we can't do in this meeting, and I've asked Steve Kelly about this, is we cannot discuss the performance of our interim superintendent, which is quite unfortunate. But it being a public meeting, we can't do that. And since we have not scheduled evaluations of our current superintendent at this time, we can't meet in executive session to discuss the performance of our superintendent. So what we're kind of left with here is a discussion of whether we want to enter into a superintendent search process or not. And so what I'm proposing is a motion to enter into contract negotiations with Jim Christ for the permanent superintendent position. And if a motion was made to do that, then a vote in favor of that would move us to negotiations with Jim, which we may or may not come to terms to with. You know, he may not choose this job, he may want some other job, or we may not be able to come to contract terms. In which case, then in our next meeting, we'd be talking to Steve Kelly about moving into a search process. And so also, if someone was to vote no against this motion, a motion like this, then it might not necessarily mean that you're unhappy with the interim superintendent's performance. It could very well mean that you would rather have a fuller search process. And so any vote we take should not be considered a negative vote in terms of the performance of the interim superintendent. So what am I leaving out?
You got it.
It's kind of a complicated point in time right now.
What is there to discuss?
We could discuss the search process. And the the positives and negatives of going into a search process. Our interim search process was a compressed timeline of a full search process. And we left out a step of a second interview. We also left out the process where the public would meet in the meet and greet, essentially, for your finalists. But otherwise, we pretty much considered, we check references and you might do a site visit. I don't know if COVID kind of changed that and site visits kind of went by the wayside. I know Will and I did a site visit years ago. Couple.
Would the best way to discuss that be to have the motion on the table on the floor?
Probably the best thing would be a motion right to start with.
I will move that we enter into negotiations with Jim Chris for the position of permanent superintendent.
Right, so that's been moved in second. Is there any further discussion without jumping into performance?
I don't know that we need to discuss it further, I would say that a detailed search throws the whole community into, dithers. We're trying to have stability, and I think that we will get another search last one. Well, ahead of the school year.
I would just say that I think our first search that we did for the interim was actually pretty exhaustive as far as candidates and research we did, and community input, and we had the teachers, community members on the committee reviewing with us. So I think that awful process was really well the first time. Even if we left out a couple steps.
And while we, to that, and speaking to that, while we didn't have a community meet and greet, we did solicit feedback from the community as part of that process. The survey did go out in terms of the priorities that parents and community members had in regards to our superintendent search, even for an interim. I agree with what Will just said in terms of stability. I think a big factor for me is the recent turnover we've had at middle school, high school. We've got a whole admin team. I think if we're able to maintain some stability in the superintendent position, with that team that's trying to get up and running together, that would be better rather than going through another search process.
That's one of my concerns is the stability and, just what Stephen said about at the high school with the new folks there and to start a search, then we're going to say, well, next year you might have a new direction. We don't know what's going to happen. And then in the meantime, the person that we have doing the job may ultimately be our choice, but might not be his choice because he's moved on to some other place. So, and then we might be left with another difficult decision. Anyway, if there's anything further, all those in favor of entering into contract negotiations with Jim Chris, be our permanent superintendent, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. So, 7.0 discussion items. One of the things we should discuss is we need a couple of board members to discuss a contract with Jim. I was involved with the interim contract and changing the permanent contract to an interim, so I would like to be involved with going back the other direction.
I was gonna actually suggest that you and I just do that, because we've had the most interaction with Jim to this point. Anyway.
Either you and I or myself and Drew.
Yeah, that's true.
was involved in the first.
You do. I'll let you take extra work.
Steven, I think you're just volunteering.
I mean, that's what I was saying.
I appreciate your vote.
So, okay. Then 8.0.
I certainly didn't mean to discredit the, what you did on the interview.
You're fine.
Reports and information. The special education report.
Busy year in special ed, as it has been, as you've heard across the buildings, busy, but a good fall. So last year we started a program at the elementary school, for our more impacted students, the Comprehensive Learning Center. We scaled that up and opened up the program, the high school level this year, and that's going really well. We have a really strong teacher in there, doing some really good things for some of our more impacted learners. So that's really great. And then just working this year on keeping those two teachers connected and working on how to shore up, a consistent theme of just transitions across the board. How do we roll our fifth graders up in sixth grade, especially taking through the special education ones, how are we doing those handoffs, making sure that especially that handoff for our more impacted kids, if they're, going through those programs is really tight, so that we can have a really clear system for that. And so in that, we're doing, we've done a lot of work around thinking about how we scale up some more intensive academic behavioral support pieces that, we kind of started at the elementary level, scaling that up into the middle school, high school level for this year. We historically have had an on-site school psychologist, and we'll get back to it. We have an on-site school psychologist. We don't this year, so we onboarded an online agency to contract and provide those services. So we've done a lot of work getting that system up and going this fall. We did it as sort of a stopgap measure last spring, but doing it as an actual intentional measure this fall. We wanted to do that, do it well, do it right. And so not only are they providing like the testing and evaluation that we need to do in order to determine if a kid might be eligible for special education. They're also assisting with some more intensive kind of behavioral mental health services for a handful of kids. So that's been a great resource to have and be able to tap into. One of our big goals this year at the middle school, high school level is really thinking about that piece around transition planning and the requirement as kids are in high school. We really have to start thinking about for students in special education. What's the post-secondary goal? What are they going to go into the military? Are they going to go into a straight into a profession? Are they looking at a trade school, a 2-year, 4-year college? What's that plan? And starting to build them for success in that in high school. We'd like to start that sooner than high school. I feel like junior year is far too late to start that conversation. We'd like to back that up and start those conversations more in middle school. So, and that's kind of a focus across the whole middle school, high school as well. So kind of partnering with what's happening in general education, how are we supporting that in special education, how are we really pulling in on that for some of our more impacted learners. Building some stronger systems around RTI, response to intervention, like the referral process. How are we supporting, even before we get to the special education conversation, how are we supporting struggling learners? How are we intervening? How are we helping them so maybe they don't get to special education, other supports we can put in place. So looking at really kind of shortening that up at the middle school, high school level. And then just continuing with professional development and some of our intervention materials we have against the staff this year, as we just make sure that the staff know what those programs are trained in some of those programs, and how are we delivering them, kind of what fits where, how are we starting to make some of those choices about what the best fit is, and what the best materials might be used with different students. And then before the end of the year, I would say a big priority for me, looking at right now we have the online school psychology services, and that's great this year. I would love for that to be able to transition back to on-site services, or to have a person, and not an online provider. Same with speech language services. Our speech pathologist resigned at the beginning of the year, and so again, we have a stopgap solution for the year, but would love to get back to a little bit better permanent place for those. So that's going to definitely be a place we spend some time this year, is think about how we're some of those more difficult to hire for positions. And so I think we have a lot to offer in this district, and so being really thoughtful of how we recruit for that, I think, is really important. And then just continuing to work with staff on that piece around interventions, helping, support general education teachers and understanding how do we deliver interventions in the classroom, and how to support not just special education students, but struggling learners, across the board. A lot of the special education teachers have a lot of expertise to offer in that area, and so trying to kind of empower them to work with their colleagues and, share out that expertise. And then, like I said, just continuing to think about how we kind of strengthen the crossover between students as they, especially in special education, as they come from the elementary to the middle school, as they go from the middle school to the high school. How are we supporting those transitions? Especially for, like I said, for our more impacted learners, particularly kids that might be served through the CLC programs. Those are students that often just have a lot of need, a lot of people at the table for them, extra providers. So how are we making sure that those transitions are as seamless as possible, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel every few years. So really kind of trying to work on systems and clarity, and making sure that we're doing the best we can for every student every day.
The ESD doesn't have any psychologists.
Really last week call. Despite that being a service that is available on the service plan, most of the districts in the region don't buy into that. You're looking at, Eugene and Springfield and Bethel that are big enough to command their own staff around that. And so many of the outlier districts, I think, have largely gone to online providers. There's a couple that buy into, I think, the 2 people that the ESD staffs, and I think one of those people is an online person. That is how they're filling the service order. So I'm reminding myself that may just be the way the world works now, that COVID changed things, but hoping that if we tackle it, the same idea, right? Maybe this is a December conversation, not a March conversation. How do we start recruiting earlier and try to get some high quality people in? So we'll see.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I always appreciate your organization. So, when I was preparing into your comprehensive learning center, I the old research room only much more organized and much more individualized for the needs of students.
Yeah, we're looking at students that have the elementary levels really geared for students with autism and other developmental delays, and then kind of as that grows in the middle high school, it might be students with really significant behaviors that really prevent them from being able to access much of any of the general education setting. And the idea being that really trying to work one-on-one, one-on-two, really, fast and furious, trying to build those skills so that they can be a little more on par behaviorally, so they can have the social skills to engage with their peers, to succeed in a classroom setting. There's a lot of kids to be successful in a classroom of 30 kids, right? And some of your more impacted students really struggle with those. And so a lot of those students have crossover supports with our occupational therapists, our autism consultant, a lot of them have speech therapy goals. And so we've got a lot of specialists at the table. And so a little bit quieter, a little bit more sensory friendly, ability to be a little bit more individualized and creative in how you're supporting this.
The other question I had was, how does the online post delivering intensive behavioral and mental health services How does that, dovetail with what surgery provided by that?
Yeah, in theory, that could be, that doesn't have to be limited to just students in special education. I mean, I definitely think that that could be like a tier 3 intervention, not yet identified for SPED. Right now, we've really only identified students who are in special ed for that kind of an intensive social skills kinds of levels of support, but I don't think it has to be. Right, you know, and so in some ways that is a bit of the silver lining, I think, to having an online provider. I actually don't have one online provider. We have one online agency. We have 3 providers. You know, part-time providers, and in some way that is in some ways the strength of it, right? You know, we have people that are really good at the assessment pieces that are doing the assessment piece, and someone that's really good at the social skills piece, you know, and so it actually does allow for a little bit of you know, play to your strengths. And so it was something we started small and we bought a few spots this year to see if it was even worth it. And I think it long term maybe could be, and maybe could be worth looking at who else might be someone we want to target for these services, and do they have to be identified for special education? Not necessarily. But how could we expand that out a little bit? I think it's a good question.
Thank you. 8.2 Pleasant Hill High School Middle School tag report. So it looked like we had anyone who's walk us through it, that we did receive it in our packet. And Pleasant Hill Elementary School tag report. That's in our packet as well.
It is in your packet and I'm available to answer questions. Or I can attempt to walk you through it as best I can too. Whatever you would like.
Any questions for Deborah?
Go ahead.
I was just interested in the conference, but take home work from that. They attended the organization, attended the students. I just wanted to take home.
The take home was, we have a lot of homework to do. So I downloaded for your, just so you can see how thick the homework is. We have to come up with a new tag plan. There are some new guidances and rules coming out, and we'll see a little bit more local control. Aaron went to the conference and then said, when he got back, there's an online Zoom, and I think you better sit in on it with me because I've got questions. It's like, oh boy, I'll probably have the same questions. And we do have some questions. We will be coming to the school board. We'll work through superintendent's office first. There is a policy that we're gonna have to update because our policy clearly does say 97th percentile in it. The state is removing that. We'll be looking at different measures that we can use and different ways of identifying students. So that we're not just about testing. And Aaron and I have talked about that, what that could look like. We'll be working with Whitney some because we'll have to have our school psychologists will be involved in this process as well. So we're just beginning to go down that road. The other thing that we found out is anyone who's identified in either building as potential to perform, that's gone away. It's like, wait a minute, we've already identified, we've given these kids plans. You can't just pull the rug out from underneath of them. We have to have a plan. So what the state has informed us is go look at the area that they are already identified potential to perform in and just go ahead and roll them into regular tag plan. Don't look back, just get it done. So that's something our time coordinators will be working on. A lot of work. Yeah, all due March, April-ish. So it's be done.
My other question was, just in general, and you had your parent conference, with the parent attack kids that are satisfied with what's going on.
Yes, yes. A lot of it is that we're hearing at the state level is folks, we need to realize that we don't have tag specialists. As you folks know, you gave us a little gift at the elementary to see if we could hire a .5 tag person, but that requires a special endorsement. Those endorsements are very hard to come by. And we've had it out there now for 2 years, and I've yet to meet anyone who has the endorsement. I've had a lot of conversations with people who call me saying, hey, I've done some tag work. Great, I'd love to talk to you more. Do you have an endorsement that the state says you need to have? No, I don't. That's what I'm looking for, is I have to look for that endorsement in order to have that position. So, the state is now saying, you know, we need to stop and help educate everyone that it's classroom teachers that are going to be providing these services. How can we differentiate? What can we be doing? And so that's an area that I know at the elementary, we've been working on for years, is looking at our differentiation. And how are we going to do those things with all students, not just select populations?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The point four was superintendent communication. And Mr. Chris was unable to be with us here tonight. He didn't dodge out because we were going to be talking about his position. He had another place he had to be and asked to be excused. But under consideration or communication, he was going to discuss the topic or issue that was brought up a week ago about getting in and out of the school parking lot with the speed zone on Highway 58. And we had a parent who came in and talked about possibly dealing with us, the school board and school district dealing with the state about trying to extend the speed zone and move the signs back. And in a conversation I had with Jim, he thought that the only way we could get anywhere with the Department of Transportation would be to have a traffic study, so you had something tangible to take to them and talk about traffic volumes and so forth. And I don't know if he's investigated the costs of doing something like that or where we would go from there. He has some other considerations here. I'll read them. Number one, increase in the student and parent traffic during drop-off times. It seems like there's more now after COVID than there was before. Decrease in bus drivers, which results in decreased routes. Decrease in routes means that routes have been combined, resulting in longer bus rides, which may account for some of the increase in parents choosing to drive their students to school rather than having to ride the bus. 3 was engaging with the Oregon Department of Transportation to be difficult, and any changes to the traffic flow and or speed will most certainly require the already mentioned traffic study by traffic engineers. Sheriff and state police currently patrol the area just outside of the district office during morning drop-off times. Consideration should be given to connecting what safe routes to school, rural Lane County, SRTS partners with rural communities to support safe, easy, and fun ways for kids to walk, roll, bus, carpool to school. Yeah, I do not know much about that. I assume Jim knows a lot more about that. Considerations should include multiple options work in conjunction with one another. Increasing bus ridership by increasing bus routes by first student. The latest update is the first student is training additional bus drivers, but there was no indication that this would result in increased bus routes for the school district. Increasing bus ridership, given current driver shortage and route combinations. C, working with the sheriff and state police patrols to see if repositioning them during the AM drop off would result in better traffic flow by making drivers more cognizant of reducing speed to allow for cars to enter, exit, or exit Highway 58. Create a communication system, Facebook, or carpool options. And other things, I think most of it is just trying to decrease the amount of traffic coming in. I think another thing that was mentioned was widening out the window, or well, that was an increase. I'm sorry, that wasn't there, but there was discussion of increasing the window for drop off times, pickup times. So. I think there's going to be some more investigation done on the interim superintendent's part. To see what we can do on this end, probably see what a traffic study costs. As an add.
Do you know if anybody has ever engaged the Transportation Commission? Not ODOT, technically it's not ODOT, but it is an actual commission.
No, I don't, you know, and that's certainly
Well,
something to think about.
I'm not an expert for sure, but I was up actually for a position on that thing, and that's where it's a driver in the decision making is the commissioners who decide there's a problem. So I don't recall who our commissioner is, but it seems to me that would be an additional step to take, is at least reach out to our representative. Share their concern.
It gets beyond the local bureaucrats. Yeah.
Yep. That used to be a Randy Cafe.
Okay. Anything else? Item 58.
At this point, we'll just continue to see what Jim has to report back.
All right, 9.0 board communication. We don't have an agenda item there. Does anyone have an announcement or anything like that?
No, I sent you on article read. I sent you on article read. That's my communication.
10.0 other business, there's none. So 11.0 is next meeting. It's a work session with the Oregon School Boards Association. Steve Kelly, right here, December 5th at 7 p.m. And then a board meeting January 9th. That date should change to 2023 at 7 p.m.
Ask who should attend the work session, is that something that Kimberly attends, is that?
Certainly, Kimberly. It's where we discuss the board superintendent operating agreement. And just communications, and I think it would be optional for you. Okay. Optional, I imagine, for the principals and other administrative staff. So we are adjourned. I didn't say you had to be out here. Perfect.
Can we use the restroom? Right on mine.